Let's talk about costs a little bit more in the realm of Moore's law. So for listeners who may not know, Moore's law refers to the perception that, the number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years. I wanted to ask you, how have materials innovations contributed to sustaining Moore's law, and do you think that is sustainable moving forward?
Moore's law is my favorite. Because, you know why? Because first, like you say, it's a perception. It's a prediction. Why is it my favorite? It's because it shows the immense amount of advancement that humans have done in terms of technology. And let's take one step back again and understand this law. Moore's law is what it's saying is Moore's in 70s, an Intel fellow, he said, I'm going to put that number of transistors on my chip, okay? And the more the number of transistors are on the chip, the more my performance or my computing performance are going to be. So the more number of transistors means faster computers, faster processing speed, and much more things that I can do with it. So everybody started getting greedy. I want to put more and more and more. So let's say I have this piece of wood in front of me. I don't know why, but this was lying here. Somebody might have dropped it. But that's the real estate you had in 70s, let's say, okay? And you had 2,500 transistors sitting in it. In the same space, in 2020, how many do you think transistors have been put on?
Oh gosh, another guessing game. I'm scared.
I don't think we're very good at this guessing.
Well, so I know transistors now are down at the nanoscale, so very, very small.
That's right.
So this is me taking a approximation at how large the area you're providing us, but be on the order of billions at this point, right?
That's true. And this time you're bang on, you're correct.
Yes.
Right?
Good job, Tom.
Right? So because we have those sheer number of, I want you to just think what it takes to bring those many number of transistors onto a small space. What is the transistor? Transistor has only three things. It has two electrodes. One is called a source, the other called as a drain. And then there is a little switch that will turn it on and off. It's called a gate on top. Those only three things. And those three things are getting smaller and smaller in size. And the way we are right now, there are orders of few atomic spaces apart from each other. It's mind-blowing to just see how this is done. And so that is why I feel like Moore's law is fantastic. Every 2 years, they say it's dead. They've been saying this for past 10 years. Moore's law is dead, Moore's law is dead, Moore's law is dead. But they have been pushing it a little bit. Moore's law has definitely slowed down. But every now and then, the advancements keep coming in. And one of my favorite examples of telling how this is now introduced is photolithography. So how does it all start? You start with a wafer, okay, and it has these billion transistors on them. How do you make these billion transistors? By a process called lithography. It's called photolithography, where essentially it's like when you have a negative of a picture long time ago when you had it and you developed it. It's a very similar process. You have a mask and you have a pattern, geometrical pattern that you want it on your wafer. It's put through the light source, and the light source actually makes an impression and leaves the geometric print on those. When you're working with nano dimensions, and in some cases even angstrom distances away, you have to work with very short wavelengths because you want to make these features that fine. You don't have a knife that would go and drill out a 10 nanometer dimension. That's what you need. light with very short wavelength. And what we see visibly is usually between 400 to 800 nanometers range. But with processing these, the light source wavelength is down to 193 nanometers. It's like deep ultraviolet radiations. Now, so what does that take? These light sources are basically lasers. And lasers, what are lasers made of? Lasers, they have, gases like carbon dioxide, and then you put a lot of current in them, you ignite them, and then it will generate a laser that can be fine-tuned to the wavelength that you're looking for. So they came down from 365 to 193. And then they said, well, we're going to make 150 nanometers of wavelength light source that can be fine-tuned to that one. And they put multi-million dollars, tens of millions of dollars into it. And that boom, that didn't work. So they're like, what do we do now? We need to get to smaller dimensions and 10 nanometers, 14, 15 nanometers that you're talking about these days. So one of my favorite tricks that I hear, what they did was, these laser lights goes through different lenses, hundreds and millions of them. They're very finely balanced out. They realized that in order to make it shorter wavelength under a lens, if they put a little puddle of water, the light is going to pass through that water and it will shorten the wavelength. There you go. You have a shortened wavelength underneath. But think about it. These massive machines with very fine and very advanced electronics in it. You put a puddle of water under a lens, a small lens. It takes a engineering marvel to be able to do so and actually make that happen. But they did it. And that's why 10 nanometers and 13.5 nanometers is possible. So Moore's law is being driven. Of course, it's slowed down heavily and probably further. It's going to, yes, die at some point. But it just brings up the advancement in technology to another level. Photolithography process, the materials, the lasers, the mask, the alignments, you name it. All of that comes from MSE.